We're going to have three sets of brief remarks here as you have dessert and coffee. And let me introduce Sean Fieler, the chairman of APP, who will speak for about an hour on monetary policy, who will in turn introduce Robbie George, who has about a 45-page manuscript on some complications in modern constitutional law, who will in turn introduce Ted Cruz, who's going to give us a day-by-day account of his year-and-a-half-long Senate campaign, which we're all thrilled turned out so successfully. And Ted and I were talking earlier today about now he's inevitable. Now he's a U.S. Senator. It didn't seem that way a year ago. And I'm not here to speak, but I will say one thing. I do think his campaign is a very good reminder of the limits of conventional wisdom as to what is possible or what is likely. Ronald Reagan, 50 years ago, it was 1966, 56 years ago, ran for having spoken on behalf of a losing presidential candidate, someone who lost very badly, Barry Goldwater, in 1964. Ran for governor of California in a Republican primary against the mayor of San Francisco, who was then a Republican. It's a somewhat different state then. Mayor George Christopher, who was the overwhelming favorite in the primary. Reagan beat him, beat the governor of California, Pat Brown, in an upset. Was reelected, ran in 76 against Gerald Ford when everyone told him he didn't have a chance, almost won that, and of course won the presidency in 1980 and changed history. And I always think we all respect Reagan and talk about the Reagan presidency. One forgets what a risk taker he was in politics and how he didn't sort of, as many people today seem to me to do too much, calculate the odds and try to pick the right time and worry about, 2 years ahead, where they'll be if they do this now. He just thought he had something to do useful he could do for the country, and he went out and did it, and in his case succeeded. And Ted had the same thought a year ago, that the citizens of Texas deserve better than the choices they were likely to get if he didn't intervene. And so he did. Let me introduce Sean, who will speak, briefly introduce Robbie, who will speak, who will introduce Ted, and then I'll conclude the thing. Sean Fieler is the chairman of the board of the American Principles Project. I've gotten to know him some over the years. He's really a wonderful person, I would say, and a very interesting thinker, a very successful businessman, someone who I think will play an increasing role in our public life. He should play an increasing role in our public life over the next years and even decades. Someone who understands economics and understands issues of principles and values, sort of a fairly rare, I'd say, combination. So it's really a pleasure and a privilege to introduce Sean Fieler.
Let me begin by thanking our sponsors here tonight, especially the Susan B. Anthony List, the Hispanic Leadership Network, Ellen Burrows and Paul Mantle, the Lehrman Institute, and Let Freedom Ring. Thank you. Thank you all. I would also like to recognize Congressman Raul Labrador, Congressman Stephen King, and former U.S. Secretary of Commerce Carlos Gutierrez. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Stephen, Congressman, and most importantly, Allegra Howe, who put this whole together for APP this evening. If she's there in the back, Allegra, thank you so much. The existence of the American Principles Project is a testament to the faith Robbie George, Luis Tellez, and Frank Cannon have in the American people. For the success of our project rests on the belief that given the right opportunity, the American people will renew our country's fidelity to her founding principles. This renewal, however, will not come by mimicking the tactics of the left, creating ever more resonant mantras, an ever better organized party, and hiring a raft of behavioral scientists to manipulate and pander to the electorate will not breathe new life into the American experiment. Such efforts will not even deliver us an electoral victory. For an appeal to the baser side of humanity, while a perfect fit with the rhetoric of the left, rings hollow for people of principle. Our base desires harmonize perfectly with the rhetoric of class warfare. And the enthusiastic embrace of sexual impulse is pitched just right for a thinned-down notion of choice and authenticity. But our baser desires do not sync up so well with a call to a higher purpose. So when we pander, we equivocate. Instead of railing against the welfare state that's squeezing the life out of our country, we promise only to run it more efficiently. Or worse still, when it comes to what are euphemistically referred to as the social issues, we promise not to talk about life and marriage, the literal future and irreplaceable foundation of our society. Needless to say, this obviously dissonant and essentially pragmatic message has failed to resonate with our fellow countrymen. And so long as we lack a resonant vision of America's larger purpose, we will also lack an electoral majority. To win, we need but make one change, to emphasize rather than run away from our principles. Mind you, not conservative principles, not Republican principles, but American principles, majoritarian principles, principles on which this nation was founded. And here, let me be specific. Across all of the work of the American Principles Project, from education that respects parents' role in the instruction of their children, to immigration policy that treats Latino immigrants the way we would want to be treated, to honest money that empowers the American people rather than the American government. There is but one principle that underlies all these efforts, and that is the unalienable dignity of the human person created in the image and likeness of God. And I assure you, our insistence on the human person as the end of a just society rather than just a means of engendering an elite vision of progress will garner support, not indifference, from the American people. And it is the perfect counter to the charge of extremism that the people of principle necessarily will face. Our project is not partisan. If only there were a little room in the Democratic Party for the unborn, we would willingly engage with them. But the abortion chants at the Democratic National Convention speak to the chasm that separates our respective visions. Regrettably, the left's spontaneous chant against life is not an aberration. It is part of a larger tension with human dignity that underlies their whole project, a tension perfectly captured in their perennial mantra, forward. Unsaid, of course, is that this means forward through the unborn, but also forward through our families, and most assuredly forward through our churches and synagogues. The Republican Party, by contrast, which first came to power with an appeal to the better angels of our nature and the equal dignity of all people, is perfectly positioned to lead the American renewal. Republicans need only trade their hesitancy for conviction and confidently express our principles in a way that elevates the American political debate. To encourage this confident articulation of principle, APP has worked to create the political circumstances in which principle can win. Now, those of you who are familiar with the details of Frank Cannon's work know that Frank has a special genius for creating these circumstances. And while we have much work to do, allow me to mention just a few of our successes. In Indiana, our own Emmett McGroarty laid the groundwork for a grassroots campaign against the superintendent of public instruction who had championed the federalization of that state's K-12 curriculum. Not only is that superintendent, Tony Bennett, out of a job, but Governor Pence and the Republican-led Indiana Senate have made parental control over education a priority. On Sound Money, Rich Danker, Ralph Banco, and Jeff Bell have tirelessly championed money that empowers the middle class rather than the financial class and the federal government. They have moved elite opinion and lent credibility to state-based legal tender legislation, which is now law in Utah. Alfonso Aguilar, head of our Latino partnership, hosts the weekly talk show host on Univision, promoting secure borders, immigration reform, and the values that we all share with the Latino community. Finally, on the central issues of life, marriage, and religious liberty, issues which Frank Cannon and Maggie Gala have a demonstrated political genius for, Robbie George has a demonstrated intellectual genius. It's hard for me to sum up exactly what Robbie George has meant to our cause or to me personally. He is so respected, so irreplaceable, and to so many aspects of the effort to bring America into fidelity with her founding principles. I think of him as the godfather of our movement. His unimpeachable honesty, his charisma, his depth of thought all lend enormous weight to his work. He's so good, in fact, that he's even earned the respect of many of our most hardened opponents. Harvard Law School, whose faculty you won't find sitting among you here tonight, has invited Robbie to teach there this semester. And Princeton University has honored Robbie with the McCormick Chair of Jurisprudence, formerly held by Woodrow Wilson. Robbie's talents have been recognized by Washington as well as the Academy. Under President Bush, Robbie served on the President's Council for Bioethics, and under President Clinton, Robbie served on the United States Commission on Civil Rights. He's the author of more than a dozen books, including Making Men Moral, In Defense of Natural Law, Clash of Orthodoxies, Embryo, and the forthcoming What is Marriage? Man and Woman, a Defense. Among his many honors are the Presidential Citizens Medal, the Bradley Prize for Intellectual and Civic Achievement, and the Teaching Award at Princeton in politics. Robbie is a serial intellectual and political entrepreneur. In addition to the American Principles Project, Robbie is the founder of the Madison Program at Princeton, the Witherspoon Institute, and a driving force behind the National Organization for Marriage and the Manhattan Declaration. We are all greatly indebted to Robbie George.